The scent of jasmine tea permeated the air, as I stared at the worn leather-bound journal in my hands. The yellowed pages contained my grandmother's elegant handwriting, revealing secrets that had been buried for nearly 50 years. I traced my fingertips over her name written inside the cover, Eleanor Chen. Below it was a date, March 15, 1972, and a simple phrase. The truth will set you free, but first it will break your heart. My name is Mei Lin Chen, and 3 weeks ago, I believed I understood my family history. Now, sitting in my grandmother's emptied apartment, surrounded by boxes of her possessions, I realized I had only known the carefully constructed version my family wanted me to see. The revelation began with her death at 92. As her only granddaughter, I was tasked with clearing out her modest apartment in San Francisco's Sunset District. My parents had moved to Arizona 5 years ago, leaving me, a 34-year-old literature professor at Berkeley, as the family representative in the Bay Area. Grandmother Eleanor had refused to leave her apartment of 40 years, even when her health began to decline. Stubborn independence was a Chen family trait, one I had evidently inherited. While sorting through her belongings, I discovered the journal hidden in a false bottom of her antique jewelry box. It was written partly in English, partly in Mandarin, a reflection of her divided life between two cultures. The first entry was dated April 1972, shortly after her arrival in America from Taiwan. What I read over the following days shattered everything I thought I knew about my family. According to our family history, my grandfather James Chen had been a successful businessman who brought his young wife Eleanor to San Francisco to build a better life. They worked hard, opened a small import business, and eventually expanded into a successful chain of specialty stores. My father, their only child, grew up in modest prosperity and continued the family business. My grandfather died when I was only 5, leaving me with vague memories of a stern but affectionate man who smelled of pipe tobacco and gave me red envelopes filled with crisp dollar bills on Lunar New Year. The journal told a different story. Eleanor had not come to America as James Chen's wife. She had arrived alone, pregnant and desperate, fleeing not poverty but scandal. The man I knew as my grandfather had not been my biological grandfather at all. The family business had not been built through straightforward hard work, but through complicated connections to powerful people who needed certain services, some legitimate, others less so. Most shocking was the revelation about my father's birth. Eleanor had been involved with a prominent married businessman in Taipei, whose family would not allow him to divorce. When she became pregnant, she was sent away with enough money to start a new life, on the condition she never revealed the child's paternity. James Chen, a distant cousin who had already established himself in America, agreed to marry her and claim the child as his own in exchange for financial backing for his struggling business. They think money can wash away the shame, my grandmother had written. They do not understand that some stains never fade, that they merely sink deeper into the fabric of our lives until they are invisible but ever present. The journal contained more startling revelations. James had not been the dedicated husband of family lore, but was often cruel and controlling, resentful of the arrangement forced upon him. The business had prospered through connections to gambling operations in Chinatown. My father had grown up believing James was his biological father, never knowing the truth of his parentage or the circumstances of his birth. Most painfully, I learned that my actual biological grandfather, Eleanor's lover, was Wei Ting-song, who had gone on to become one of Taiwan's most influential political figures. He had visited San Francisco secretly on 3 occasions during my childhood. In fact, one of my most cherished memories, of an elderly family friend, who had taken me to the Japanese tea garden and bought me a jade pendant, was actually a clandestine meeting with my biological grandfather. The pendant still hung around my neck. I had never taken it off, believing it was a simple gift. Now I understood it was an inheritance of sorts, the only acknowledgement he could safely give. I closed the journal, my hands trembling slightly. Outside, fog rolled through the San Francisco streets, obscuring the neighbors' houses. It matched my mental state. Familiar landmarks suddenly indistinct, boundaries blurred. I had always prided myself on knowing who I was, on the solidarity of my family identity. Now I questioned everything. My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. It was my father. "How is the packing going?" he asked, his voice carrying the slight accent that 50 years in America had never quite erased. Your mother wants to know if you found her mother's jade hairpin. It is going fine, I lied, staring at the journal, still sorting through things. I have not found the hairpin yet. Well, keep looking. It is important to your mother. He paused. Are you planning to drive down this weekend? We need to discuss what to do with the furniture. I hesitated, suddenly unsure how to speak to this man who had raised me, who had himself been raised on carefully constructed falsehoods. Did he know the truth? Had Eleanor ever told him? I suspected not. The journal indicated she had intended to take these secrets to her grave. I might need another week here, I said carefully. There is more than I expected. That is fine. His tone was distracted. I could hear papers shuffling in the background. My father had never fully retired from the family business, even at 70. Call if you need anything. After hanging up, I made myself another cup of jasmine tea, my grandmother's favorite, and considered my options. I could reseal the journal, pretend I had never found it, and carry on with my life unchanged. I could confront my father with the truth, potentially shattering his sense of identity at an age when such foundations should not be disturbed. Or I could investigate further, confirming my grandmother's account before deciding what to do. I chose the third option. The next morning, I visited the city records office. As a researcher by profession, I knew how to dig through archives, following paper trails across decades. I found Eleanor's arrival records, confirming she had indeed come to America alone in March 1972, for months pregnant according to the medical screening notes. I located the marriage certificate showing she had married James Chen 3 weeks later. A hasty ceremony at City Hall, not the traditional family celebration I had been told about. Business records showed the first Chen import store had opened 6 months after their marriage with significantly more capital investment than a new immigrant couple could reasonably have accumulated. The business had expanded rapidly over the following decade, branching into several neighborhoods with suspicious speed. I also searched for information on Wei Ting-song. His career in Taiwan was well documented, his rise through political ranks, his family connections, his philanthropic work. Photos from the 1970s showed a handsome man with intelligent eyes and a confident smile. I could see echoes of his features in my father's face, and perhaps in my own. Records indicated he had indeed visited San Francisco 3 times during my childhood, ostensibly for trade conferences. The dates aligned perfectly with my memories of the family friend, who had shown such special attention to me. He had died in 2003, hailed as a national hero in Taiwan, never publicly acknowledging his American family. By the end of the week, I had confirmed most of my grandmother's account. What remained unclear was whether my father knew any of this. The journal suggested Eleanor had kept the truth from him, fearing it would destroy his relationship with the only father he had ever known. But people keep their own secrets, and I could not be certain. I spent another day sorting through my grandmother's belongings, finding more subtle evidence that confirmed her story. Photographs with cryptic notes on the back, letters in Mandarin that hinted at hidden connections, a small locked box containing newspaper clippings about Wei Ting-song's career alongside a dried corsage. As I worked, I contemplated the ripple effects of secrets across generations. My grandmother had lived a life divided between truth and necessary fiction. How had that shaped her? How had it shaped my father through the unspoken currents that flow through families? How had it shaped me, the granddaughter raised on carefully edited family stories? I thought about my academic work. My research focused on immigrant literature, on narratives of displacement and belonging. Had I been unconsciously drawn to these themes because I sensed, on some level, the fractures in my own family history? By Sunday evening, I had made my decision. I would tell my father what I had discovered, not to hurt him, but because at 70, he deserved the chance to know his true origins before it was too late. The secrets had already done their damage across 2 generations. Perhaps truth, however painful, could begin the healing for the third. I drove to Arizona the following weekend, the journal secured in my bag, my thoughts tumultuous during the 11-hour journey. My parents had retired to Sedona 5 years earlier, drawn by the dramatic landscapes and milder winters. Their home sat on a hillside with views of the famous Red Rocks, a peaceful retreat after decades in the busy city. My mother greeted me with her usual warmth, embracing me tightly in the driveway. Born in California to second-generation Chinese-American parents, she had always been the more demonstrative parent, balancing my father's reserved nature. "Your father is in his study," she said as she helped me with my bag. "He has been sorting through old photographs all week. Your grandmother's death has hit him harder than he wants to admit." I nodded, my throat tight. "I need to speak with him. Alone if that is okay." Something in my expression must have alerted her. Her smile faded, replaced by concern. "Is everything all right, Mei?" "I found something in grandmother's things," I said carefully. "Something I need to discuss with Dad first." She studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I will make myself scarce for a while. Take all the time you need." I found my father in his book-lined study, surrounded by photo albums and loose photographs spread across his desk. He looked up and smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling behind his glasses. He seemed smaller somehow, more fragile than I remembered from my last visit 3 months ago. "Mei," he said warmly, standing to embrace me. "Good drive." "Long but easy," I replied, returning his hug. I sat in the leather chair across from his desk, suddenly uncertain how to begin. He must have sensed my hesitation. "What is it? You look just like your grandmother when something is troubling you. That same crease between your eyebrows." I took a deep breath and removed the journal from my bag, placing it on the desk between us. "I found this while clearing out her apartment. It is grandmother's journal from when she first came to America." My father glanced at the journal without touching it. "My mother was a private person," he said quietly. "She would not have wanted her personal writings read." "I know," I acknowledged. "And I would have respected that if what I found did not affect our entire family history." He went very still, his hands flat on the desk. "What are you talking about, Mei?" "Dad, do you know the circumstances of how grandmother came to America? The real story, not the one we have always been told." His eyes remained fixed on the journal. "Why do you ask questions to which you already know the answers?" The response surprised me. "You know?" He sighed heavily, removing his glasses to rub the bridge of his nose. "Not always. I learned the truth when I was 32, around your age now. James, the man I had always known as my father, was dying of cancer. My mother thought I should know before he passed." I stared at him, stunned. "You have known for almost 40 years? And never said anything?" "What was there to say?" he asked, his voice controlled. "The man who raised me was still my father in every way that mattered. The man who contributed to my existence was a stranger who chose his political career over his responsibilities." "But this changes everything about our family history," I protested. "Does it?" He looked at me steadily. "Does it change how I raised you? Does it change the values we taught you? Does it change the love in this family?" "No, but then it changes nothing essential." He picked up the journal, running his fingers over the cover. "My mother made difficult choices in impossible circumstances. She built a life for us, protected me from truths that could have only caused pain. But she lived with so many secrets," I said. "The journal reveals how much she suffered, especially with James. He was not kind to her, Dad. Not the devoted husband we were told about." My father's expression tightened. "Their marriage was complicated. James gave me his name, his protection. He could have sent us away, but he did not. Was he perfect? No. But he was the only father I knew." "What about Wei Ting-song? Did you ever meet him?" A shadow crossed his face. 3 times. After I learned the truth, he arranged meetings when he visited San Francisco. They were awkward. He was a powerful man used to deference, not to having an adult son questioning his choices. "He met me too," I said quietly. "The man who took me to the Japanese tea garden when I was 8. That was him, was not it? He gave me this pendant." I touched the jade hanging around my neck. My father nodded slowly. "He wanted to see you. I allowed it on the condition he present himself only as a family friend. You were too young to understand such complications." "And after that? Did you stay in contact?" "Occasionally. He sent money sometimes, For your education, he said. I put it in a separate account, but never used it. It still sits in a bank in San Francisco untouched. He smiled faintly. Your college tuition came from the business your grandmother and James built, not from Wei Ting Song's guilty conscience. I absorbed this, trying to reconcile the father I thought I knew, practical, straightforward, occasionally stern, with this man who had harbored such significant secrets. Why did you never tell me? What purpose would it have served? He asked. To tell a child her grandfather was not really her grandfather? To burden you with knowledge of a prominent man in Taiwan who could never publicly acknowledge you? These were adult complexities, not a child's concern. And when I became an adult? He sighed. Perhaps that was my mistake. But by then the narrative of our family was set. Your grandmother asked me not to disturb her story while she lived. After Wei Ting died, it seemed even less relevant to unearth old secrets. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of concealed histories hanging between us. Outside the window, the red rocks of Sedona glowed in the late afternoon sun, ancient and immutable. There is more, I finally said. About the business. Grandmother's journal suggests it was not built entirely through legitimate means. My father's expression hardened. The early years were difficult. James had connections in Chinatown, not all of them respectable. But by the time you were born, everything was legitimate. I made certain of that. So you knew about that too? I suspected as a teenager. I confirmed it when I took over the business after James died. I spent the next decade cleaning up lingering entanglements, ensuring everything was above reproach. He leaned forward. Judge us by what we became, Mei, not by how we began. I thought about my comfortable upbringing, my expensive education, the opportunities one had been given. How much of that had been built on a foundation of secrets, compromises, and possibly illegal activities. I do not know what to do with all this, I admitted. It feels like everything I understood about our family was a carefully constructed fiction. Not fiction, my father corrected gently. A story told from a particular perspective, emphasizing certain truths while minimizing others. Is that not what we all do with our lives? Focus on the narrative that helps us make sense of our experiences. His words resonated with my academic work, the theories I taught my students about narrative and identity. We construct ourselves through the stories we tell, both to others and to ourselves. Does Mom know? I asked suddenly. About Wei Ting Song, yes. About some of the business complications in the early days, no. There was no need to burden her with that knowledge. More secrets, more selective truths. I wondered if all families operated this way, layers of knowledge distributed unequally among members, each person carrying their own version of the collective history. I am not sure I can go back to seeing our family the same way, I said finally. I do not expect you to, my father replied. But I hope you can understand the choices that were made. Your grandmother was 19 when she became pregnant, alone in a society where such things brought terrible shame. James was not a perfect man, but he offered a solution when she had few options. I was not a perfect son or father, but I tried to take what was given to me and make something better of it. He paused. That is all any of us can do with our inheritance, whether it is money or secrets or unresolved histories. My mother knocked gently on the door then, entering with a tray of tea. Her expression told me she had been listening, at least to part of our conversation. How much did you hear? My father asked, not unkindly. Enough, she replied, setting down the tray. Enough to know there should be no more secrets in this family. She looked at me. Your father wanted to tell you many times over the years. I was the one who insisted we wait. You. I was surprised. My mother had always seemed the more open parent. She nodded, pouring tea into 3 cups. I was afraid it would change how you saw yourself, how you saw us. That was my mistake. Children should not be protected from truth at the expense of understanding who they are. The 3 of us sat drinking tea as the sun set over the red rocks, casting long shadows across the landscape. We talked for hours, about Eleanor's life, about James's complexities, about Wei Ting Song's brief appearances in our family story. My parents shared details they had kept hidden for decades, and I told them how finding the journal had made me question my own identity. You are still Mei Lin Chen, my mother said firmly. Your history may be more complicated than you knew, but you remain who you have always been. Our daughter, Eleanor's granddaughter, a scholar, a woman of compassion and intelligence. Those truths have not changed. Later that night, after my parents had gone to bed, I sat alone on the patio, looking up at the star-filled Arizona sky. I thought about my grandmother, navigating a new country with a new husband and a baby on the way, building a life on necessary secrets. I thought about my father, learning at 32 that his origins were not what he had believed, yet choosing to continue the family narrative to protect those he loved. Had they been right to keep these secrets? I could not say with certainty, but I understood their choices better now, seeing them not as deceptions but as shields against pain, as compromises made in difficult circumstances. The next morning, I helped my father sort through more of Eleanor's photographs. We labeled them together, but now with the complete stories. The real dates, the actual relationships, the true contexts. It was a small act of correction, but it felt important. What will you do with grandmother's journal? I asked as we worked. He considered the question carefully. Keep it, I think. Not hidden away as she did, but as part of our family record. The complete story should exist somewhere, even if we do not share all of it with everyone. I nodded, understanding now that family histories exist in multiple versions. The public narrative we present to the world, the private truths we acknowledge among ourselves, and the unspoken realities that shape us in ways we may never fully comprehend. Before leaving Arizona, I visited a local jeweler and had my jade pendant reset with 2 small diamonds on either side. One for my grandmother Eleanor, who had the courage to build a new life in impossible circumstances, and one for my father, who had protected her secrets while creating something better for the next generation. What is this for? My father asked when I showed him the modified pendant. To acknowledge the complexity of our family story, I replied. The secrets and the truths, the past and the present, all part of who we are. He nodded, his eyes bright with emotion. Your grandmother would approve of that. On the drive back to San Francisco, I thought about the courses I would teach next semester, about how differently I would approach the immigrant narratives that had always been the focus of my work. I understood now, in a deeply personal way, how people reconstruct themselves when they cross boundaries, geographical, cultural, moral, and how the stories families tell themselves can be both shields and prisons. My grandmother's journal had indeed broken my heart, just as she had written it would, but in that breaking had come a different kind of freedom. The freedom that comes from understanding not just the sanitized version of one's history, but its full, complicated truth. As I crossed the Bay Bridge, returning to the city where 3 generations of my family had built their American lives, I realized that the most valuable inheritance my grandmother had left me was not any material possession, but the truth she had finally shared. In her words, carefully preserved for decades, she had given me the gift of an authentic history, with all its painful complexity and unexpected beauty. The scent of jasmine tea seemed to fill my car as I drove toward home, as if Eleanor's spirit accompanied me, finally unburdened of the secrets she had carried for so long. I would make tea when I arrived at my apartment, pour a cup for her memory, and begin the process of integrating these new truths into my understanding of who I was and where I had come from. Some stains never fade, she had written. They merely sink deeper into the fabric of our lives. But perhaps, I thought, those very stains become part of the pattern that makes each family unique. Visible now to those who know where to look, contributing their own dark beauty to the tapestry of our shared history.